Good evening. This is Edvar Torah on Parshas Shemos. It is the first Parsha of the Sefer Shemos, the second of the five books of Moses. It begins with recounting who are the names of Yaakov and his sons, and of Yosef, who went down to Egypt earlier, and it then talks about the 70 Neshimas that went down of Yaakov's family. The Parsha then continues with all of them dying out, announces a new Pharaoh rose, subjects them to extremely hard slavery and suffering the Jewish people, because they're worried about them becoming a fifth column and joining with the enemies. Pharaoh then tells the Jewish midwives to kill all the baby boys because his prophet, a so-called wise man, had told him that there was going to be a boy that was going to arise. Moshe, and then they don't listen, so he orders all the baby boys to be drowned. Moshe is born when his mother can no longer protect them. At 3 months old, she sends Miriam's suggestion. She sends him in a basket made of weeds and covered with pitch so that it would survive. And Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, finds him and adopts him. And then Miriam says, "You want to have a Jewish woman to know wet nurse for him?" And she says yes. And so he was able to stay with his mother for 3 years. He then is raised in Pharaoh's palace. He sees a Jew being whipped by an Egyptian taskmaster. Says he looks both way in all directions, and then he kills him. And immediately after that, shortly after that, the Chumash reveals that Pharaoh knows about it, tries to kill him, and he flees eventually to Midian, where he meets Yithro and marries Yocheved. I will have much more to say about the incident with the Egyptian and meeting of Yithro. And then Hashem, after many years, calls on Moshe to be his representative, as prophet, to lead the Jewish people. He argues with being very modest man, Ananav, as we say in Hebrew. He refuses to go to Hashem insists. And this is after Moshe has already seen the burning bush, which indicates to him that it's holy land. And then Hashem speaks to him for the week. He goes back with the signs that Pharaoh gave him, and Pharaoh ignores it, makes the labor harder on the Egyptian, on the Jews, by not providing with the bricks to build these cities. And it ends with Moshe saying, why did you send me? It just made matters worse. And that, in some very quick summary, is the Parsha. Now, the things I would like to refer to is the whole opening with what says, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Hayu B'Yamim Ahim Yigdal Moshe V'Yotze El Achav and Yira Nisuluchtam V'Yira Ish Mitzri Mikoa Sher Ivi Brachav Yifen Koach Koa Baka Yiraki Ein Ish Yirech Mitzri Yitemen Bako. And it says when Moshe was grown, he began to go out to his own people, and he saw their hard labor. One day he saw a Mitzri, an Egyptian, kill one of his fellow Jews. Moshe looked all around, and he saw that no one was watching. He killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. Then he gets found out, he flees, and he winds up in Midian, where he who he lives with. Midian, Yisro gives him Zipporah as a wife, and he's gone in sheep for many years. So what I would like to ask a number of questions. Why are these events in very close position to each other in Chumash? Many years of Moshe before he gets to being skipped over. It's in Midrashim. And then after that, despite that, he then is called on his holy nation by Hashem. Now, so besides the question of why are they in juxtaposition, my other question is going to be is what is the connection between the Mitzri, the woman, the Mitzri, seduced by fraudulent means, and what does that have to do? What does Mitzri have to do with Moshe and Yisro and Yocheved? Now, to understand this fully, one has to go back some generations, in fact, at the beginning of creation of man and woman, to fully understand this. And this is the story of Cain and Abel, or Cain and Abel in English. They were the first two humans born of woman, because Adam and Chava had been created. Now, what was supposed to happen, and by the way, this Devar Torah should be Elias Neshama, my mother, Sarah Bas Leib, on the occasion of her 21st yahrzeit. And the question is, what happened there? Adam after he committed the sin, they were thrown out of Gan Eden, Adam and Chava. Now, there was, they were not born alone. Cain, who was the oldest, and Hevel was the second oldest. They weren't born alone. Cain had a twin sister, and Hevel, we'd call it triplets. They had two twin sisters, or a triplet if you prefer. Now, what were they supposed to be doing? They were supposed to be having married the sisters. I'll explain in which order in a second, to help populate the world, because the next son of Adam Rishon and Chava was 130 years later, which I spoke about in the previous Devar Torah. In any event, what happens is the arrangement was supposed to be that Cain was supposed to marry one of the sisters of Hevel, and Hevel was supposed to marry one of the Cain's sister. Actually, it should have worked, but there was a problem. There was a extra sister to go around, the second one of Hevel. Now, what happened there is that they got into a dispute about the second sister, who was quite beautiful. Now, Cain claimed he should have her as a wife because he was the oldest. And the firstborn gets a double parsha. He gets two wives, and Hevel should only get one wife. Now, the inheritance of the firstborn under the Torah, this is way before the Torah is talking about property and wealth. It's not talking about wives in any way. But in those days, this was the way view he took. Now, a dispute arose. According to some sources, and this Torah is based on Shar HaPasukim, Shar Gulim, Likutei Torah, works of the Shlara, and various Midrashim, in part. Now, what happened then was, according to some sources, Adam Rishon suggested that they let God decide on how are they going to do it. Each one was going to bring an offering to Hashem, and whoever's offering was accepted meant that they were supposed to get the second wife, sister of Hevel. So when they offered the korbanot, the sacrifices, offerings, if you want to call it, Hevel's was accepted, and Cain's was rejected. So it was an indication that the second sister was supposed to go to Hevel. Now, so that created very bad blood and animosity, because Cain didn't feel what he was getting what he was intended to, and then so that created bad blood. It got even more complicated because then Cain was asked by Hevel to offer to marry Cain's sister. And Cain refused because he said she was beautiful also, and he should keep her. So then Hevel became furious. They had gotten into a dispute. Hevel knocks Cain. If you look at the text closely, Cain rises up and kills Hevel. Now, in the success of that story, what does he do? He takes that second second twin sister of Hevel. He takes her. He steals Hevel's sheep, and that's the end of the incident. Now, what does all of this have to do with Moshe and Yithro and Yocheved and the Mitzri? Now, it goes like this: the soul of Cain, a Gilgal, in other words, the reincarnation, went to three different people, because let me explain. A soul has 5 parts, and all 3 we talk about are nefesh, ruach, and neshama, which is the highest of the 3. Now, the nefesh of Cain went to the Mitzri, and that part of Cain's neshama, as it was reincarnated in a Mitzri, was full attached of the Nachash, the snake, the Yetzer Hara, all the impurities were attached to it. And that Mitzri was also, he was a reincarnation of Cain. And why did he approach the Jewish woman who thought it was her husband coming back to be intimate with her? And it turns out it was the Egyptian. Why was he seeking to be with Shulamit Bastibri? Because she was a Gilgal spark of the soul of Hevel's second sister, and therefore he wanted her. And since he was totally evil and totally impure, he took her any way he could get her. And and therefore he was Hevel. Now, who was Moshe? Moshe, after being reincarnated as Noach's third son, Shem. How did all that happen? And in this generation, Hevel was reincarnated as Moshe. So part of the tikkun here, the intention to make everything right, the improvement was that Moshe killed Cain. That was Mida Keneged Mida, because in the earlier generation, Cain had killed Hevel. Now it says he looked around. Moshe looked around and then killed the Mitzri. Now, how did he kill him? This is something I originally heard from my teacher, Rav Uziel Malevsky, was the ephable name, the 42-letter name. Now the question is, why did he kill him like that? Because because the only way that the nefesh part of a Cain's neshama could be purified was by destroying the evil, which could only be done with the 42-letter name. And that was and once that was done, the other part of the soul, the neshama part, the nefesh, was freed up from the impurity, which allowed Yisro to get the neshama part, and that was the beginning of that aspect of Cain becoming purified. And eventually, Yisro stopped being the chief priest of idol worship, and eventually became Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. And by coming as Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, that was also a tikkun, because that was supposed to bring unity between Cain and Hevel and have a unified family. Now, how does that woman fit in? So, Mida Keneged Mida, because Hevel, Cain had taken Hevel's sister improperly, the Mitzri had to suffer, and he looked around right and left. Why? Was to show that he checked to see his ancestors and his descendants, and there was no worthwhile neshama, because one can only kill with the ineffable name if there's no worthy ancestors and descendants. And how did that part of Cain, fix himself that way? Because by killing Hevel and improperly taking a wife, it destroyed all future generations of Cain, at least the evil ones. Now, Yisro then had to Yisro had to give one of his daughters. Why? Even though so his neshama was becoming holy, was so that there was a tikkun for the fact that Cain had improperly taken Hevel's sister, and therefore he had to take, and he wouldn't give his own sister to Hevel, so he had to give one of his daughters, which was Zipporah, who was Zipporah. Zipporah was Zipporah was, according to some sources at least, was the spark of either Hevel's sister, or more likely was actually Cain's twin sister. She came back, Zipporah. So that was righted, because Cain had denied, that sister. and then denied him that sister. And therefore, he gave her in marriage. Now, Sipporah, interestingly enough, missed, as we'll see in a couple of weeks, Parshas, the crossing of the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, and the Shir on Yam, and all the miracles in Egypt, because Moshe sent her away. So she got a chance to do her own thing. Was where she got reincarnated as Devorah. That's for another time, another parsha. In any event, we see that the plans of Hashem and are multi-generational in all the tikkunim and meeting out of justice is multi-generational, and that Hashem ways are deep. I would like to wish everybody a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.